I never thought much about being remembered. Most of my life I've been the guy who blends in, you know? Average height, average build, the kind of face that people see every day and forget by evening. My friends used to joke that I had a superpower for being invisible in crowds. So when the bouncer at Wavelength remembered my name after just one visit, I figured it was a fluke. Maybe he had one of those freakish memories. Maybe it was a slow night and I was the only person he'd carded in an hour. I didn't think about it too much, honestly. But then I went back the following Friday, and he smiled the moment he saw me approaching the door. Not the professional bouncer smile, the one that's really just a warning that says I'm watching you. This was different. This was warm. And before I could even reach for my wallet, he said, "Hey, Asher, good to see you again." Just like that. Asher, my name, clear as day, while the guy in front of me had just been waved through with a generic, "Have a good night, man." That's when I started paying attention. His name was Ezekiel. I learned that the third time I went, when I finally worked up the nerve to ask. He laughed when I did, this deep, genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Took you 3 weeks to ask," he said. "I was starting to think you didn't care." He was tall, probably 6'3", with dark skin and these incredibly expressive eyes that seemed to notice everything. He had the build you'd expect from someone who spent their nights managing drunk college students and aggressive finance bros, broad shoulders and strong arms, but there was something gentle in the way he moved. He wore the standard black security shirt, but somehow on him it looked tailored, like he'd taken care to make sure it fit just right. His hair was cut close, neat, and he had this habit of rubbing the back of his neck when he was thinking. I noticed that habit pretty quickly. I noticed a lot of things about Ezekiel pretty quickly. I started going to Wavelength every Friday. Before Ezekiel, I'd been the kind of person who went out maybe once a month, usually because friends dragged me along. I'm not antisocial or anything, I just never felt like I fit in at clubs. The music's always too loud, the drink's too expensive, and there's this performance everyone does, this peacocking, that exhausted me. But suddenly, I had a reason to show up. Every Friday at 10:30, I'd walk up to that door, and Ezekiel would be there. He'd see me coming, and his whole face would change. Not just a smile, but this full body shift, like my arrival was the best part of his night. "Asher," he'd say, and I swear to God, hearing my name in his voice became the highlight of my week. We'd talk for a minute or two. Nothing deep, just small talk about the weather or how busy the night was or whether I was meeting friends inside. But those minutes mattered. Those minutes became everything. I started noticing how he was with other people. He was professional with everyone, polite, efficient. He'd check IDs, make small talk, keep the line moving, but he didn't remember anyone else's name. I watched him card the same group of girls 3 Fridays in a row, and each time it was, "Have a good night, ladies," with no recognition in his eyes. A guy who showed up almost as regularly as I did got nothing but "I do please" and a nod. But me, I got Asher and that smile, and sometimes, if the line was short, he'd ask me how my week was. Really ask, like he actually wanted to know. I started saving up stories for him. Little things from my job at the bookstore. Funny customer interactions. The weird coffee shop I'd discovered on Tuesday. Nothing major, but he'd listen like I was telling him the secrets of the universe. And he'd remember. The next week, he'd ask follow-up questions. Did that customer ever come back for the Murakami book? Or, how was that coffee shop? Did you go back? It was intoxicating being seen like that, being remembered. I didn't realize I was falling for him until my roommate pointed it out. Marcus had been watching me get ready on a Friday night, spending way more time on my hair than usual, changing my shirt 3 times. "You know this is just sad, right?" he said, sprawled on the couch with his phone. I asked him what he was talking about. Dude, you're getting dressed up for a bouncer. You're going to a club you don't even like so you can have a 30-second conversation with a guy who's literally paid to be nice to people. I told him he didn't understand, that it wasn't like that. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew Marcus was right. It was exactly like that. I was going to Wavelength for Ezekiel. Only for Ezekiel. And somewhere along the way, those 30-second conversations had become the thing I looked forward to most in my entire week. That's when the fear set in. Because what if Marcus was right about the other part too? What if Ezekiel was just being professional? What if remembering my name was just some customer service technique, some way to make regulars feel special so they kept coming back? I almost didn't go the next Friday. I stood in my apartment, already dressed, and seriously considered staying home. The idea of walking up to that door and realizing that Ezekiel's warmth was just part of his job, that I was reading everything wrong, that I'd built up this whole fantasy in my head, it made me feel sick. But then I thought about not seeing him, about breaking this routine we'd somehow built together, and that felt worse. So I went. And the moment Ezekiel saw me, his whole face lit up. Not the professional smile, something bigger. "Asher," he said. And then, "I was worried you weren't coming. You're usually here by 10:30, it's almost 11. He'd noticed. He'd been watching for me. My heart did this stupid flip in my chest, and I made some excuse about losing track of time. He looked at me for a long moment, and I felt like he could see right through me, could see every confused feeling I was trying to hide. Then he said, "You doing okay?" And his voice was so genuine, so concerned, that I almost told him everything right there. Instead, I just nodded and said I was fine. He didn't look convinced, but the line was backing up behind me, so I had to go inside. I didn't stay long that night. The club felt suffocating, the music grating, everything too loud and too bright. I kept thinking about Ezekiel standing outside in the cold, about the way he'd looked at me with actual concern, about how he'd noticed I was late. I left after maybe 40 minutes, which meant I had to walk past him again to get out. He was dealing with a drunk guy who was arguing about the cover charge, so I tried to slip by unnoticed. But Ezekiel saw me. Even while he was firmly explaining to the drunk guy that the price was the price and arguing wouldn't change it, his eyes tracked me. After he finally sent the drunk guy away, he stepped over to where I'd paused by the door. "Leaving already?" he asked. I told him I wasn't feeling it tonight. He nodded slowly, then said, "Listen, I get off at 2. There's a diner around the corner that makes pretty decent waffles. If you wanted to wait or come back, I'd really like to talk to you. Properly, I mean, not just 30 seconds at a door." My brain short-circuited. I think I just stared at him for a solid 10 seconds before managing to say yes. He grinned, this brilliant, relieved grin, and said, "Yeah, okay. Good. I'll see you at 2, Asher." I killed 2.5 hours at a 24-hour coffee shop, drinking tea and pretending to read while my mind raced. This was a date, right? Or was it just a friendly thing? Did Ezekiel like me, or did he just want to talk? And if he did like me, what did that mean? I'd only recently come out, and even then only to close friends. I'd never actually dated a guy before. I'd never really dated anyone before, if I'm being honest. The whole thing felt surreal. At 1:55, I walked back to the diner, and Ezekiel was already there, sitting in a booth by the window. He'd changed out of his work shirt into a dark green Henley that made his eyes look even warmer. When he saw me, he waved, and I felt that flip in my chest again. I slid into the booth across from him, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Then he said, "I'm really glad you came back." We talked until almost 5 in the morning. The waffles were just an excuse, something to order so the waitress wouldn't kick us out. Ezekiel told me he'd been working at Wavelength for 2 years, that he was saving money for grad school, that he wanted to be a therapist. He talked about growing up in Atlanta, about his huge extended family, about coming out when he was 16, and how his mom had cried, but his grandmother had just shrugged and said she'd always known. I told him about the bookstore, about my degree in English that I wasn't using for anything except recommending novels to customers, about how I'd always felt like I was waiting for my life to actually start. And then, because the exhaustion and the late hour made me brave, I told him I'd been coming to Wavelength just to see him, that I didn't even like clubs, but I liked those 30 seconds at the door more than anything else in my week. He was quiet for a moment, and I was terrified I'd said too much, ruined everything. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was warm and slightly rough, and the touch sent electricity up my arm. "Asher," he said, "I remember your name because from the first moment I saw you, I wanted to. You walked up to that door looking kind of nervous, and when you smiled at me, it was the most genuine smile I'd seen all night. Most people don't really look at bouncers, you know. We're just obstacles between them and their fun. But you looked at me like I was a person, and then you came back, and I got to see you again, and I started hoping every Friday that you'd show up. I remember your name because I think about you a lot more than I probably should." I didn't know what to say to that. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it across the table. So instead of saying anything, I turned my hand over and laced my fingers through his. We sat like that for a while, just holding hands across a sticky diner table at 5 a.m, and it was perfect. It was the most perfect moment of my life. Eventually we had to leave because the breakfast rush was starting and we'd been taking up the booth for hours. Ezekiel walked me to my car, and we stood there in the parking lot as the sun started to come up. He asked if he could see me again, properly this time, not at the club or a random diner. I said yes before he even finished the question. He laughed and pulled me into a hug, and I fit against his chest like I'd been designed to be there. When we pulled apart, he looked at me with this soft, wondering expression. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and I nodded, not trusting my voice. The kiss was gentle, tentative, his lips soft against mine. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but I felt it in my entire body. When we broke apart, we were both smiling like idiots. That was 6 months ago. We've been together ever since, and I still go to Wavelength on Fridays, but now I go with Ezekiel after his shift ends. We stay for 1 drink, maybe 2, and then we leave together. He still works the door, and I watch sometimes from inside, watch him check IDs and manage the crowd with professional efficiency. And I watch him not remember anyone's name. Last week a girl asked him if he remembered her from the previous weekend, and he gave her an apologetic smile and said he sees hundreds of people a night. Which is true. He does. But he remembered mine after 1 visit. He remembered mine because he wanted to, because I mattered to him from the very beginning, the way he mattered to me. Marcus says we're disgustingly cute together. My co-workers at the bookstore have started calling Ezekiel the bouncer who remembered, because I told the story so many times. And Ezekiel's grandmother, who I met last month and who is exactly as wonderful as he described, told me that her grandson talks about me constantly, that she's never seen him this happy. I never thought much about being remembered, but being remembered by Ezekiel, being chosen by him, being seen, it changed everything. It changed me. Now, when I walk into a room, I don't try to blend in anymore, because I know that to the right person, to the person who matters, I'm unforgettable. And that person is waiting for me every Friday night, smiling when he sees me coming, ready to say my name like it's his favorite word. Total char count: 14,987.